My name is Judith Bates Pictulabilwa. I was born in Worcester, Mass. My mother was from Massachusetts, and my daddy, my biological father, was from Piedmont, Alabama. My father came from the tribe of the Cherokee Nation, down in the I would say lower south. So he was born in Piedmont, but his family was more from the South Dakota area, and my mother's father was born in Montreal, where he come from the Mohawk tribe, and moved into the New York state back in the late 1800s. And my grandfather was literally born in Canada, but he moved. I think he was 2 years old when he went to New York. He was brought up there, married my grandmother, my mother's mother, which was an Irish woman, and had two daughters. And my mother was the oldest daughter. And so I was born in Massachusetts, and till about the age of 7, and then we moved down south. But those 7 years was a rough go. My mother was an alcoholic, and she drank a lot. She was never home. She would do these little parties and not come home. So my siblings, I had four other siblings. I had an older brother and sister, and I had a younger brother and a sister. So I was the middle child, and so I was. It was a rough go. I would say up until I was 7, and my mother lost custody of us. My mother and father divorced, and my father got custody of us children. It was just 3 of us at the time, of 4 of us. My younger sister wasn't born yet. And so my daddy had worked in Massachusetts for a long time, but then he lost his position there, working in a factory where my grandfather ran on my mother's father. And they ended up going to, we went down south. We lived in Tennessee, Chattanooga, Tennessee, for 3 years. And there I continued my schooling in a private school, Catholic school. My dad was Protestant, but he always wanted us to go to a Catholic school. So we were brought up there for 3 years. I had no contact with my mother for those 3 years. And my dad was having a rough time trying to raise 4 kids by himself, working full time. My older sister was, playing the mom role, which she didn't want, and she left home, at 14. And my older brother left home, and he was just 13 at the time, 12. So my dad sent me off to Massachusetts to live with my grandmother, which is my mother's mother. And there I stayed there for a bit, and I found out that my mom was living in Canada. She had remarried a Micmac man here in Canada at River First Nations. And I wrote her a letter, and I came to live in Canada at the age of 10. It was really hard living here because I didn't have the dark skin and the dark hair and the dark eyes. They always said, "Well, you don't look like one." And I was like, "Well, I don't know what to tell you." But and then people would ask my sister, "Well, you an Indian?" But she looks like an Indian, but I didn't. And do you have the same parents? And we say, "Yeah, we had the same parents." But anyway, so when I came to Canada to live with my mother and my stepdad, he was a Micmac from River First Nation, and it was really hard because I was so excited to come to Canada and live on a reservation, they called it, and but I didn't feel like I fit in here, and I was really teased and bullied when I came here to River, and and kids would be cruel and pull my hair and spit on me and throw gum in my hair, and I'd go home crying because I was never a fighter, and and I never hurt anyone. So my daddy would, my stepdad at the time would say, "You got to go out and fight. You have to go and fight. Don't let them get away with that. You fight back." And I didn't want to fight back, but at the end of the day, I was fighting. I had to fight to survive, and I didn't like that part of me, that I always had to fight, and I always had to, I used my stepfather's last name, Pictou, and people would question me why I was using that name. He wasn't my father, and they're always questioning, and and it was really, really hard to live here at that time, and but my parents were severe alcoholics, and they were the biggest bootleggers here at Overbar. And our house was a big party house, and I remember just have to live in that society, and in that home, and then have to go to society, and people always knew that, like, my parents were drunks, literally drunks. They drank, they fought over beer. It wasn't fun. It wasn't a fun childhood. Um, but I got involved with sports, and that's what kind of kept me going in school. And I was a good kid, and people liked me, and so I was friendly, and so I kind of fit in with society. And I had friends that were, non-natives, and I had friends, some girlfriends here at Overburn. But I got involved in sports, and I loved it. I worked hard. I was a good kid in school, even though I came from a family of alcohol. Um, I was still a good kid. Um, I wasn't really a drinker at the time. I hated it. I didn't like alcohol, but everybody did it. It was the norms. It was like everyone drank. Everybody would drink and do drugs and smoke cigarettes, and that was normal. That was a normal life for people. That's all we knew. When it was a Friday night, you get drunk. It's a wedding, you get drunk. It was someone died, you get drunk. Someone had a baby, you got drunk. That's what it was. And I really had a hard time with that. And all my friends drank, and I felt like, oh, try it, Judy, try it. And I tried to drink, and I didn't like it. And I used to think it was so horrible. I tried to drink beer. I drank lemon gin. We tried all kinds of different things, and I really had a hard time to drink. I didn't like it. I tried smoking cigarettes. I didn't like the cigarettes. Um, but I did. I just kept doing it because everybody else was doing it. So I was trying to fit in and be the same, but I didn't really like who I was becoming. And I had a boyfriend that I ended up at 14 years of age, and he came from a single mom, and she didn't drink, so he didn't drink, and he didn't smoke, and so I kind of, like, that was kind of where I wanted to be, and that's where I was for until I graduated. I met my husband to be that I married. I got married, and had 3 children, but the marriage was horrible. There was abuse. My husband was a severe alcoholic. Lots of beatings, and thrown out with my kids. Fight all the time, and it was just a horrible, horrible marriage. And I spent 15 years in the marriage, trying to think it was going to get better, but it just kept getting worse. And my girls were, terrified of their father. You know, Nighttime he'd wake us up and throw us out, and it was just a really rough go. And in 2000, in December of 2000, well, actually in 1998, my husband and I separated, and I finally had a little bit of peace. It was a rough go for that first year, because he would come to the home and destroy things when we weren't here, and the girls were always afraid. And then in 2000, my middle daughter was 13 and was diagnosed with leukemia, and I was going to nursing school at the time, and I had to withdraw from school to be with my daughter during her treatments. She had 30 months of chemotherapy, and we spent many weeks in Halifax at the IWK, and we traveled back and forth. When my daughter got sick, her name was Bobby Joe, and my oldest one was Tiffany. There was 2.5 years difference, and Jasmine was just, she was probably, I think, 5 when Bobby Joe got sick, and it was really rough as a single parent. I had already lost my mom. My mom died in 1993, so I was basically alone. My 2 older siblings lived in Huntsville, Alabama, and my younger brother as well had lived here for a bit and left, so I had no siblings here at all. A half sister that we don't really, we're not very close. So I was really alone on this journey of this, with my daughter being sick, and it was just very overwhelming, and I just remember, I had, I couldn't stand my husband at the time. We had already had separated, and when this happened, it kind of brought us all back together, and it was really hard to forgive him at that point, but just because of my daughter being so sick and she needed both of us at that time, I had to put all how I felt about my ex-husband, and and just be there for Bobby Joe, and with some help from my ex-husband's family, um, a little help, wasn't a whole lot of help, but they were there for Bob, and so years had gone by, and in 2008, I went back to school and I got my nursing. But during that, my daughter fell sick again. She had a relapse in 2007, and I was still in nursing at the time. And so her father and I decided that I would spend weekends with her in Halifax, and her dad took a leave from work and he stayed with her during the week, so that she could have both of us, one or either one or the other, not both at the same time. But so that was really rough because it was a lot of traveling back and forth and trying to study for school, and still 2 children at home. Um, the oldest girl was in university, but I still had a younger daughter at home that was missing her mom and her sister, and wondering if her sister was going to die. And it was really, really a rough time for everybody. And people sometimes don't understand that the person that's sick is very sick, but um, the family itself is affected. Everybody's affected when somebody becomes sick, and it was really emotional, moments of laughter, and moments of tears and crying, and anger, and you know wondering why this was happening to our family. And Bobby Joe, my middle daughter, she was 20 years of age, and she died, not actually from the cancer or from the bone marrow transplant, but from an infection, which had affected all of us. It was a very emotional. I never ever in a million years would have thought that I would be burying one of my children, and it was very emotional. And I was a mess. I was a total mess at the time, and I had just finished my nursing, so I had got a job at the Hamilton Regional Hospital, and at the time I had got hired from the Old River Bar First Nation to do a needs assessment for a future health facility in our community. So I pretty well, after about 2 months after Bobby Joe passing on, I was basically barely getting out of bed, and then finally I said I had to get back to work, and then all I did was work, and became very tired and wasn't sleeping anymore. And then reality kind of kicked in, realizing that my daughter wasn't coming home. she wasn't coming back to us. Um, Everybody grieves in a different way. I was about a year. Mm, it was about a year later after Bob had passed, and I just started to fall into a big depression. Even, I was starting to drink more at that time, and I wasn't happy at work, being a nurse and not seeing people treated the way they should be treated, and it started to become an emotional, um, on me, and I fell apart. I literally fell apart. Um, became I became to be using alcohol and drugs on an everyday basis, and it continued till I came to a point in my life that I wasn't happy with, and literally tried to commit suicide. And after 3 days of not waking up, I realized that I had a second chance in life, and became and said, "Wow, how come I didn't die? Like, I should be not here today." And I came back. And at that point, I thought, well, I had a second chance in life, and I had to change. The way I was living my life. So I literally signed myself into a rehab at Wyoming in Mariah, and I stayed there for 6 weeks, and to get the treatment that I needed, because I had a lot of scar tissue from just in my heart from being abused as a, being Indigenous, to be abused by my own husband, by family members, by friends, from community members. It put a toll on me, and I was a total mess. But after going to rehab and getting back on track, my first experience a week after being in rehab is going into the sweat lodge, and that was amazing. And that's where all that weight had came upon me, and it just lifted, and I just loved it. I couldn't wait to be into the next lodge, and from that day on, I have continuously been going to the lodge, and I actually now work for Ilverbar First Nations, and I work for the health department, where I still do some personal care. I have upgraded my nursing license, and I do the foot care for the diabetics, and I also do prevention with Child and Family Services today. And I work with I have a girls youth group, and I have a co-ed group in the summer, and we work on I basically try to work with on physical activity, about healthy eating. So I do cooking classes with my families during the winter months, from the fall to the spring of the year. I literally go into homes, and we talk about budgeting, and what's healthy eating, and we do recipes, and we cook, and give some advice you know on parenting. We've had different courses I put on. Not always me being the speaker, but I bring in other people, and we talk about parenting, how to talk to your children. Um, we try to do culture. I try to promote culture. So we've had culture classes where we've done um, native craft work, where we've done beading, earrings and bracelets, and moccasins, and we mitts, and we also I've even promoted where I've had my group. We haven't got there this year, but we have in the past, where we've even brought them to a lodge, and they all actually got to go into the sweat lodge. Some of them lasted one round, some lasted two, some lasted three, some lasted four. And I was so proud of all of them. At least they had the experience of what to expect in the lodge, and and have some teachings on where would they come from. Even though my mother was Mohawk and my father was Cherokee, I was brought up with the Mi'kmaq tribe, and I was adopted by my stepdad, And and I married Micmac and a Micmac man, and my children, uh, they followed the Micmac culture, and I'm kind of still like a lost soul, not sure where. I have been brought up in Overbar with the Micmac people, but deep down, I know that my families are Mohawks. Inspires me to keep me going is I basically think it's the youth because growing up I didn't have that childhood that I wanted. I grew up too fast. I was playing the mother role at 7 years old. So when I to to see these kids to have fun and to participate in all my activities that I plan for them, it's so nice to see them because I'm like that little kid all over again, that youth, and that adolescent years that I didn't get to have. Um, and it really inspires me. So my advice to Indigenous women is to live your life, to the fullest. Um, get educated, you know, um, teach other women, culture is so important. Know about your culture, where you come from, and, and just keep your head high.